Hey, what's up? My name is Ultrawide and I was paying close attention to this year's iPhone release. The upgrades in new Pro iPhones got me thinking, is the camera really that good? I decided to test it myself and compare it to the older iPhone 13 Pro. How does the new model compare and which one should you buy for photography? Which one is the best deal? So let's do some pixel poking and find out together. First things first, what has changed besides the camera modules? To an ordinary person, all these small changes and tweaks mean nothing, but the truth is, those small changes make it a totally new phone. Well, in a way. Let's quickly leave hardware changes behind so we could focus on the camera upgrades. The body is almost unchanged, almost similar in width, height, and length. The camera bump is slightly more bumpy. Inside, you can find a new A16 Bionic chip that uses 4nm technology instead of 5nm on the 13 Pro's A15. 14 Pro is a tiny teensy faster. Additionally, this chip now packs an updated image signal processor that is responsible for photo processing. We'll check that out later. The screen got slightly bigger and 2 times brighter. Now it goes up to 2000 nits. Believe me, you will notice that difference in direct sunlight or under powerful artificial light. iPhone 14 Pro has an always-on display, but it's not as great as you would expect. It also got this new dynamic island with smooth, naturalistic, fluid animations. It's a completely different way of interacting with the phone's certain aspects, but it still seems more like a gimmick than something really useful. It also has crash detection and emergency satellite connectivity for SOS. 14 Pro holds charge under load slightly better and does have improved 5G connectivity. The list of these additions does make 13 Pro look somewhat old, but under the hood, 13 Pro is still a very capable phone, especially when it comes to cameras, the main difference between the two. First, let's quickly talk about the upgrade, probably not really relevant to you, the selfie camera. Apple has added autofocus and advanced image processing algorithms. Shots are more detailed, but the dynamic range is still not great in bright environments. If you're planning on shooting multiple selfie videos, the 14 Pro is a no-brainer. But since we're focusing on photos, the selfie camera on 14 Pro is not a very big upgrade over the 13 Pro. Now to the real hero, the triple camera system. Here, the difference between these two phones seems huge, especially if you believe everything Apple says. 14 Pro has 48 megapixel main camera instead of 12, updated sensor on a telephoto camera, and improved ultrawide. A special photonic engine and the latest image processing algorithms are responsible for making the shots better. The same goes for video. Cinematic mode on 14 Pro supports 4K instead of 1080p on 13 Pro, and the 14 Pro has action mode. But as soon as you really start shooting, almost all improvements slowly disappear. Let me explain. On paper, the camera on the 14 Pro are superior in every way, but when you see images side by side, you start noticing that the difference is minor. By default, that huge 48 megapixel sensor on 14 Pro only produces 12 megapixel shots, just like the 13 Pro. In daylight, there is almost no difference in quality or details, as well as colors or dynamic range. Just look at these photos, they look really similar. Yes, the photonic engine makes photos sharper and yields more detailed images, but the difference is negligible. Low light photos also look alike, which is strange. But as soon as you look closer, you see that photos from 14 Pro are brighter, less noisy, and more detailed. The shadows are treated better, the highlights are flashy, and all these light sources are processed better. However, I've noticed that 14 Pro sometimes colors the photos differently. Maybe that's because this photonic engine is still new and has to learn, but overall, the main camera, while shooting in 12 megapixel, performs similarly. To see the differences, you need a big, bright, color-accurate screen. But all those similarities disappear when you turn on 48 megapixel RAW on 14 Pro. The bigger sensor just demolishes the 12 megapixel module in 13 Pro in every way. Yes, 48 megapixel RAW images weigh 30 times more than regular 12 megapixel shots, but they pack so much more data. These RAW images are much more detailed and balanced without heavy processing. Textures, shadows, highlights, everything is better. Just look at that difference, like night and day. If you are like me and are ready to spend hours tweaking each shot in a photo editor, you will definitely unlock the whole power of this new camera. These heavy raw images just beg for a precise tweaking of every little detail, every color, every highlight. We can zoom in, and on every zoom level, you will see more details on the 14 Pro. Human faces, skin, environment around, all materials and small details, everything is almost on par with professional cameras. Yes, a good camera will outperform the iPhone, but shooting with our phones is just so easy. Point and shoot. But keep in mind the difficulties with file transfers. Transferring these raw images in full size without compression isn't as convenient as you could expect from Apple. Now, let's pay some attention to the zoom lens, which is slightly better on the 14 Pro. It absorbs more light and has bigger pixels and better aperture than on 13 Pro. Plus, that artificial 2x zoom. 14 Pro in terms of zoom is more versatile without a doubt. More options equals more creative freedom, but if we look closer at shots from these phones with the same magnification, we can see that the newer sensor and better algorithms are not producing a substantial difference. The trend here continues: more details, less noise, better dynamic range, but I think that this difference is too small to say that 14 Pro is miles better. With some edits, you easily can make the shots made on 13 Pro look identical to ones from 14 Pro. Let's fire up our trusty PhotoWorks and open the photo taken on 13 Pro. It already looks great, but to make it look similar, we should add some sharpness. Let's add about 15% more sharpness. Okay, already looking better. Now the shadows, just increase this parameter a little to extract some information from them. And next, I will dial down the highlights a bit to make them more detailed. Okay, all that's left is to add some contrast and vibrance. Boom, just look at them, almost twin brothers. And all those enhancements took less than a minute. PhotoWorks is a really powerful editor suitable for any task. By clicking on the link in this video description, you can get this app at 60% discount. And now we are moving on. Now, what about ultra-wide lenses? These lenses have always been a weakness of iPhones. Grainy, noisy image, and sadly, almost nothing has changed. I still don't get why they can't use a really big sensor for ultra-wide. Now, the photos these two phones produce are shameful. In daylight, they look fine, even good. The details, the colors, the texture preservation, everything is okay. But as soon as we go darker, well, see for yourself. If we zoom closer, we start seeing how images fall apart. Noise, poor dynamic range, lack of details. Both of these phones are doing a tolerable job, but 14 Pro is slightly better. But again, the difference is not big enough. The changes are more apparent in the video department, which I presume isn't really interesting to you. So let's dedicate only a minute to that. The main difference between phones is in the new action mode and updated cinematic mode on 14 Pro. The cinematic mode on 14 Pro shoots in 4K resolution, while 13 Pro can only do 1080p. The edge detection is better, the overall level of detail is noticeably better, but this mode still changes colors and tones mid-shooting, which doesn't allow for a clean and consistent look in video. For me, this is merely a toy to play with. I forbid you from using it in professional shootings. Even the main video mode can sometimes give a cleaner, more consistent look, but that's just food for thought. The action mode is a completely different story. Just look at it. It's just buttery smooth on 14 Pro and a shaky mess on 13 Pro. But the level of detail, it's terrible. And when you go low light, it just gets worse. Noise, bad image treatment, everything falls apart. Personally, I really like this mode, but I can only see myself using it in well-lit environments. Overall, I consider the camera upgrade on 14 Pro to be reasonable. The changes are real, but only when looking closer. Main 48 megapixel camera with those sweet raw images is sick. I know that images weigh a lot, but if you're planning on doing mobile photography, this should be your weapon. This sensor will not let you down in any situation. I cannot say the same thing about other cameras though. So, should you buy an iPhone 14 Pro for photography or save some cash and buy 13 Pro? In my opinion, both phones are great in the camera department. The 13 Pro is just a better deal for its price. All those small improvements the 14 Pro has will not be as noticeable when compared to previous generation phones, especially when looking at those images on social media. But if you're really aiming at pro photography and high resolution, then 14 Pro is a no-brainer. Last year's 13 Pro is great from every angle, starting with exceptional battery life, fantastic screen, and great cameras. 14 Pro is just better in every way, slightly, but better. I would put my money on the 14 Pro anytime. I guess that's about it. So hit that like button if you like this video and subscribe to the channel, and see you soon.